Murders, ambushes, tortures, robberies, kidnappings, shootings. Those are all criminal activities cartels have been engaging in since their origin, and whether it was on purpose or not, there have been occasions in which such crimes were registered in video. With that being said, stay tuned, because today we'll uncover some of the most brutal cartel crimes ever caught on tape. Cities immersed in violence. It is true that Mexico is known worldwide for its rich culture, history, and cuisine. On the other hand, when we think about the Latin American country, it's hard not to be reminded of its violence and criminality, and all of it is mostly due to the cartels. Those are criminal organizations known for constantly terrorizing the population with violence, while engaging in a never-ending quest to gather more and more power. With that being said, it's unfortunately not unusual to have one news report after the other denouncing some cartel crime or activity. Most recently, the residents of Culiacan lived a 24-hour real-life nightmare as drug cartel hitmen started a bloody rampage as a protest against Joaquin El Chapo Guzman's son, Ovidio Guzman's arrest, as well as an attempt to free him. As a result, 35 people were wounded and 29 were killed, among 10 members of the military and 19 alleged cartel shooters. Guzman, known as El Raton, was arrested on January 5, 2023, in the city of Culiacan, known for being a stronghold of the Sinaloa cartel, whose former member was El Chapo himself. When the news broke, Sinaloa's state security chief Cristobal Castañeda and the city of Culiacan's profile went online to warn and beg citizens to be careful. Don't leave home. The safety of Culiacan's citizens is the most important. This preoccupation doesn't really come as a surprise once we learn that the citizens actually knew what was coming. The fact is, that was the second time Guzman was detained by the police. The first time took place on October 17, 2019, and led to such a strong and violent cartel retaliation that the police decided to let him go, fearing mass casualties and destruction. The episode was so shocking and memorable that it is remembered as the Culiacanazo, the Battle of Culiacan, or even Culiacan's Black Thursday. At the time, hundreds of gunmen started to attack civilians and the military non-stop, starting a war in itself where no one was safe. Several videos recorded by civilians are now all over social media. They help us to have a glimpse of the terror Mexicans went through that day. Over more than 4 hours, sicarios set up at least 19 blockades in the streets by setting fire to buses and trucks. From barricades to ambushes, shootouts to carjackings, documented by the terrorized citizens of Culiacan. Every resident remembers that day and will always remember what they were doing as the chaos unfolded. Some ended up getting shot despite trying to flee and protect themselves, while others locked themselves up in their homes or establishments, hoping for it all to be over soon.
De pronto empezamos a escuchar disparos. Primero fueron pocos y después empezó a intensificar y se escuchaba como si estuviéramos en plena guerra, ¿no? O sea, era impactante.
Many Mexicans admit that they are aware of the violence that surrounds them and that apparently they were used to such an environment. However, on that fateful day, October 17, 2019, they had a real-life glimpse of what that violence really was as they were forced to confront it without further warning. That was when they finally understood and felt all that fear and horror for the cartels. And as a result, from now on, they can never feel totally safe again. All of the footage captured then is here to remind them of it. Equipped with body armor, armored vehicles, and a variety of both light and military weapons, such as rocket launchers, grenades, and heavy machine guns, the criminals quickly spread themselves around the city and got the upper hand against the authorities. Fearing more destruction with the situation getting totally out of control, the government retreated and released Guzman on the same day. President López Obrador said on the occasion that he made this decision to avoid the loss of life. Now, in 2023, despite knowing what was ahead of them, authorities were not willing to step aside again. On their second attempt, authorities managed to capture Ovidio Guzman at 6:20 a.m. and quickly transferred him to Mexico City. However, even with the operation itself being successful this time around, that did not stop the cartel members from retaliating once again. Local and state authorities tried to do their job and warned the population to stay inside. They announced that work was suspended from all municipal employees and all administrative educational activities were suspended in schools that day. However, that wasn't enough to put a stop to the sicarios. For the following 24 hours, the citizens of Culiacan and its whereabouts relived the same horror and trauma they had gone through more than 5 years before. Once again, no one was safe.
This morning, a video circulating on social media showed passengers on a plane at the Culiacan airport ducking for cover, children scared after the sound of gunshots erupted. Aeromexico confirming one of its planes scheduled to depart this morning was struck by gunfire.
Criminals were once again setting fire to vehicles and blocking roads, but this time around, they also broke into Culiacan's airport to try to prevent authorities from extracting the cartel leader. All across the city, the sicarios tried to spread chaos once more and managed to make quite a noise. However, the Mexican police eventually learned how to stop the criminals, at least on short notice. Roadblocks managed to be dismantled and dozens of guns, equipment, and vehicles were apprehended. At least on that day, justice had won. Being able to terrorize an entire city twice sure is enough to consider both incidents in this video. Culiacan's population might have managed to overcome these episodes, but as I mentioned earlier, violence is something that surrounds Mexicans every day. The feeling of living under a real threat all the time, a violent act that can strike you in a matter of seconds. It's always been there. Sometimes all it takes is to drive through a highway to spot bodies hanging from a bridge, for example. This terrible crime took place in the city of Cuauhtemoc, 550 kilometers north of Mexico City. In the state of Zacatecas in November 2021, Mexican authorities discovered 10 male bodies that day. 9 were hanging from an overpass and 1 was found on the pavement. Investigators believe that those deaths could be a result of the battles between drug cartels to take control of the state, specifically the Sinaloa and Jalisco New Generation cartels. Victims of these violent clashes are often publicly displayed to admonish rivals and authorities and terrify local residents. That is precisely what happened in another Mexican city, Monterrey. On that occasion, a teenager was rescued after being left swinging from a rope on a busy highway. In broad daylight, he had a gunshot wound and was next to 2 other men. Both of them were found dead while hanging alongside the boy, who had a cell phone taped to his hand. Police claims that indicates the victim was an informant. Considering that this crime happened more than 10 years ago, it is quite alarming to notice that such crimes have been going on for so long, and nothing seems able to stop them. In fact, the gruesome war between the Mexican police and cartel members is widely known worldwide. It is common to hear reports about both sides attacking and ambushing one another, resulting in intense shootouts and casualties. One of those clashes was caught by security cameras outside a taco shop in Irapuato in the Mexican state of Guanajuato in July of 2019. It shows 2 on-duty criminal investigators being ambushed by drug cartel members. The whole action happens very quickly and lasts only 20 seconds. The video starts with both police officers inside the white pickup truck, preparing to leave the shop. As they back up, a white SUV parks outside. An armed individual gets out of it and slowly heads towards the truck, aiming and shooting his gun. The agents quickly jump out of the car as other criminals get off the SUV, shooting the truck. The cops go after some cover. One goes behind a car, and the other protects himself on their own truck's engine, as the criminals also position themselves to attack. Meanwhile, the cop that stayed in the truck goes back inside to get his rifle to properly face the delinquents. He opens fire on the criminal's white SUV, which is now on the other side of the street, going away from the crime scene as the criminals hop in. Another angle shows that one of the bandits was actually left behind and became the officer's main target. However, he and the other attackers, plus the SUV's driver, managed to escape. Despite being severely wounded, the officers stood their ground and fought the criminals. After the attack, they were transferred to a hospital to get medical attention. Later, investigators found a vehicle in which the hitmen were presumably in, but the criminals' identities and motives for the attack were never revealed. Unfortunately, this is only one of the many ambushes and combats between authorities and cartel members. It's easy to go online and find a lot of footage from body or surveillance cameras that shows the ongoing terror in the country. Another violent crime caught on tape was of a drug cartel kidnapping, another incident from over 10 years ago that shows us how little the cartel situation has improved in Mexico. The abduction took place in a convenience store in the state of Chihuahua and exemplifies to us how efficient the cartel's criminal methods really are. In the video, we can see the victim standing in the corner of the store wearing white pants. The man seems relaxed, and authorities claim he was probably a drug dealer, possibly making a casual stop at the convenience store for some eventual trade. Whatever the case, the thing is that he was probably followed. As the video goes on, we can see a grey car pulling into the store's parking lot, possibly leading the operation. We can presume that, as we notice that the car is followed by a convoy of 5 trucks that quickly surround the store. As they get into position, the hitmen get out of their trucks, pointing heavy guns at the target, who has no other alternative but to go with the bandits. In a matter of seconds, the criminals get back inside their trucks and leave the crime scene. Unsurprisingly, news reports claimed that the victim had a tragic fate. It was believed by authorities that his body was found days later with a shot to his head in a large body dump along with other victims. At this point, it really seems as if those cartels don't have any respect or concern for human lives or dignity. It's easy to make this assumption once we learn about another crime caught on tape. I'm talking about an attack that occurred on February 2022 in the town of San Jose de Gracia in the state of Michoacan. Cartel members lined up several unarmed men against a wall at a funeral for the mother of an alleged former hitman for the Jalisco cartel. The crime was captured by a resident at a distance. In the footage, we can see the men being lined up as the assassins aim their guns at them. They eventually shoot at them. Gunfire bursts break out, and a lot of smoke covers the street. In shock, our cameraman or woman turns the camera away from the massacre. The next day, investigators found a clean crime scene as the criminals had washed the sidewalk and removed the bodies. The only things left behind were a bag full of brains and shell casings from bullets. Later on, investigators claimed that the gang members went to the funeral looking for the hitman, who apparently died in the attack. Despite getting all the attention when it comes to the subject of cartels, Mexico isn't the only country that suffers from their violent activities. One of the most violent cartel crimes caught on tape happened in Puerto Rico in December 2021. Be aware, because this is where the video starts to get really brutal. The incident is told by Vietnamese tourist Sir Andy on his YouTube channel. In the video, Andy describes the most violent night of his life while he was visiting the Caribbean country. The thing is that as much of Puerto Rico is known for its beautiful beaches and exquisite food, it also suffers a chronic problem of gun violence and gun and drug trafficking, the perfect environment for cartels to emerge and fight for control. As Sir Andy was roaming around the neighborhood at night, a gang shootout took place, and the footage captured by a surveillance camera is extremely shocking. In what appears to be the outside of a house, 5 men are talking and drinking, apparently having a good time on a calm evening. Until that point. As one of them heads inside, all of a sudden, a red car emerges in the street and shoots the 4 men multiple times. They are all severely wounded, as none of them are able to stand up anymore. One of them manages to reach for his gun and shoot the aggressors, and another man appears from the bottom of the video to join him. Meanwhile, we see that the red car parks a bit ahead in the street, clearing some space for a blue car to turn and join the massacre. Having a numerical advantage, it doesn't take long for the aggressors to get the upper hand and take the remaining victim down. Right after that, the aggressors approach the house and violently shoot the victims multiple times to make sure they are dead. And as the blood is spread on the pavement and women and children cry, the killers manage to get away. The cartel brutality. There are 2 kinds of videos that display cartel crimes. First, there are the ones caught by surveillance cameras or civilians, as we saw up until now. Then, there are the ones that we'll uncover now, the cartel execution videos. They are infamous videos filmed by cartel members themselves that keep getting more and more common. They are videos that the sicarios want you to see. Whether their purpose is to warn and intimidate their rivals and police, or spread fear and terrorize even more of the population, one thing is for certain. They sure are some of the most gory and brutal shots one can ever imagine seeing. Years ago, the drug gangs used handwritten notes attached to dumped victims to communicate with rival groups, but the airing of such videos on blogs, websites, or even YouTube quickly became their main communication network. According to experts and police, every time a conflict between certain groups escalates, more videos are uploaded online. The tapes basically follow the same structure. The captives are tied up, blindfolded, and positioned in front of the camera in a remote and anonymous location. They are often bloodied from beatings and surrounded by captors, who are always masked and heavily armed. Usually, one captor questions the victims, who are forced to confess alliances to rival cartels. Then, they are often tortured, and at the end, sometimes murdered on camera. One of the videos that sparked a lot of controversy in the media is one where members of the Los Tlacos cartel lined up rival members of the La Bandera gang, a group that was part of the Guerreros Unidos cartel, for mass execution. The footage shows a masked man taunting the captives, who are kneeling in line, handcuffed and with their faces showing off. The aggressor violently interrogates the men by grabbing their hair and pointing his gun at their faces. He forces them to say their names, gang nicknames, and their roles in the cartel. A voice opens up the video by narrating it.
Gente de Iguala, aquí están todos los culos que extorsionaban y que andaban matando gente inocente y mujeres. La basura que tenían en terror a esta bella ciudad, se los dijimos y llegó el momento, esta plaza ya tiene dueño.
The fact is that Los Tlacos accused the incoming and new mayor of Iguala, David Gama, of being connected to the Guerreros Unidos. The video doesn't show the executions, but later on reports that said gang members left 4 of the 20 bodies in front of the mayor's home. As those videos are extremely violent and graphic, they gain popularity on more obscure websites where the gang members continue to upload them. Needless to say, we won't be showing any of the gruesome tapes in this video. One of the most well-known videos out there is one known as Ghost Rider. Published in late 2020, the video depicts brutal torture and murder. Those behind the act were members of one of the biggest and most dangerous Mexican gangs, the Cartel Jalisco Nueva Generación, or CJNG, a gang based in the state of Michoacán. Meanwhile, the victim is suspected to be a member of CJNG's main rival group, the Carteles Unidos, or La Resistencia, a group formed by a bunch of smaller cartels joining forces against their common enemies. Both cartels dispute control over the Michoacán state, which over the past years was transformed into a real hub of cartel violence. This happened mainly due to its natural resources and advantageous drug routes and seaports. As the CJNG has been advancing in this bloody battle, other cartels try to resist and impose themselves over the CJNG's takeover, such as the Carteles Unidos. Despite being greatly outnumbered and outgunned, the cartel has grown and resisted enough to become quite an obstacle for CJNG. As for the video, its story starts in September 2020, in the town of El Aguaje. Both cartels engaged on a turf that lasted for 3 days and resulted in 20 dead people. One member of the Carteles Unidos, however, was captured and taken to a ranch in the city of Tepalcatepec, where the video was filmed. The footage, which has only 1.5 minutes in length, starts with the abducted man already notably wounded and kneeling on the ground, surrounded by several armed cartel members. It is said that before being murdered in the video, the victim was tortured for 3 days. And what we see at the beginning is the aftermath of all of that. His face was allegedly burned by being rubbed with alcohol and then being set on fire. If that wasn't enough, it is believed that his face was also flayed. The video opens up with the victim's head held up to the camera by someone who pulls his hair. CJNG members don't waste much time and quickly set his face on fire once again, but now on tape. His clothes caught fire as well, and the man starts to agonize. The pain was seemingly so excruciating that the man manages to break loose from one of the cartel members and starts to roll around on the floor in an attempt to put the fire out. As he does so, he lets out a guttural and terrifying scream, while the cartel members watch in a sickening delight. If that wasn't enough, CJNG members repeat the entire process once again, showing the victim's face up close to the camera and setting him on fire. At this point, we see a really graphic and disturbing image. The man's face has become completely melted, with no distinguishable features whatsoever. Despite begging his torturers to kill him, the process is restarted once again. The video skips forward to reveal the man even more burned. Now, his whole head has been completely burned to the point of being simply a red skull, wearing burned clothes. For one last time, the man is set on fire yet again by a cartel member. As the aggressor does so, he can be heard saying, just like the movies, the Avenger Ghost Rider, as the other members burst into laughter. Meanwhile, it seems that the nicknamed Ghost Rider has lost all the energy to even scream. Instead, all he can do is let out harrowing, animalistic grunts as the video ends. The whole thing becomes even more disturbing when we take into account how the victim was fully conscious throughout the entire torture. The Ghost Rider's real name and identity remains unknown. As the video became popular online, many rumors and myths surfaced trying to uncover who he was and what he could have possibly done to receive such a gut-wrenching end. Whatever the real story is, I guess we can all agree it's a horrifying one. But CJNG's violence and brutal executions don't stop there. In another tape, published in 2020, the gang members not only murder another victim, but end up committing cannibalism. The act is reportedly carried out by their sicarios as a way to scare their rivals and pledge loyalty to the cartel. The 1-minute-long video is titled, "Sponsored by Adidas." It depicts the murder of a man who is unknown to have any cartel affiliation, but apparently was from the city of Tepalcatepec. The tape starts with the victim laying on the ground on his back. He's wearing nothing but underwear and has his hands tied and a chain around his neck. As usual, he's surrounded by several CJNG members. Suddenly, the man wearing the Adidas cap pulls out a huge combat knife and sticks it into the man's chest. The victim screams as the killer keeps going. He forces the knife down the victim's chest, creating a huge cavity that exposes the victim's internal organs. Once again, all of this while the victim is still conscious. With the man's chest and abdomen wide open, the killer sadistically sticks his hand inside the victim's body, poking and delving with his organs. As he reaches the man's lung, the killer grabs it and cuts a piece of the lung off. If that wasn't unsettling enough, he removes his face covering and puts the chunk of the lung in his mouth. He then chews it and eventually eats it. As the members cheer and the victim is horror-struck. The camera goes back to the victim and focuses on his lungs, which continue to work despite bleeding out and popping out of his chest in a disturbing image. But perhaps the most infamous cartel video online is the one known as Funky Town. Released in 2016, Funky Town is not only one of the most explicit and graphic cartel videos out there, but one of the most mysterious. There is no information surrounding which gang was responsible for it or which group the victim was affiliated with. The 3-minute-long video starts with a bloody man laying on the ground, surrounded by numerous cartel members. The location is unclear, but many claim that it was filmed in the back room of some nightclub. The man is laying around his own blood, which is spread all over the white tile flooring. As the camera moves close to the victim, we notice how severely injured he truly is. His arms are tied up in front of his chest, but his hands are cut off. His face is completely flayed, revealing his muscles and bones, and his eyes have been gouged out. If that sight wasn't gruesome enough already, one of the cartel members is still trying to slash the victim's throat with a sickle to torture him some more. The victim tries to protect himself by trying to get into the fetal position, but the torturers easily get the upper hand. Now, armed with a box cutter, they start to slash the man's throat. The victim, struggling from the pain, can only helplessly cry out and gurgle in his own blood. The torturers continue to slash his throat, carefully enough not to hit any major arteries or veins, in order to keep the victim alive as long as possible. As they keep going, the victim starts to twitch and struggle violently on the ground. That's when the song Funky Town by Lips Inc. starts playing in the background. The cartel members have to hold the victim down for him to stop sliding in his own blood. Close to the end, we see a heartbreaking and violent scene. The victim manages to break his arms free from the rope and instinctively tries to touch his non-existent face with his non-existent hands, while one of the members starts whistling and singing along to Funky Town. The man with a box cutter starts stabbing the victim in his armpit. Shortly after that, the video ends. Offering more questions than answers, Funky Town has been intriguing the deep web for a long time now, and has actually become the most popular topic in gore online. The only certainty is that the video was filmed in Mexico, considering that the men in the footage speak Spanish with Mexican accents. Over the years, many myths have been spread about the tape. The main one is that there is a longer version of it, allegedly depicting more of the victim's struggle and possibly his murder. According to some people online, this extended version could range from 6 to 11 minutes long. However, those claims have never been supported by any evidence. Because of its graphic and brutal violence, many believe that Funky Town could be a CJNG video, but once again, there isn't any evidence or proof that can confirm this. In fact, those explicit execution videos are a true nightmare to investigators and authorities. That is because they serve as a simple and extremely effective cartel propaganda tool that is widely available. One thing about the internet we can agree on is that even if major sites remove this sort of content, those who know where to look can always find what they're searching for. And with those violent videos roaming around the web, at the same time that it incites fear in the population, it can also intensify a never-ending cycle of violence by inciting new attacks inspired by copycat killings. And to top it all off, those videos can serve no use for investigators in tracking gangs down. If you think the reason for this is that the criminals are often masked or in unknown locations, guess again. The reason is much more surreal than this. It is simply because investigators don't know if those videos are real. A spokesman for Mexico's federal police once said that the apparent murders cannot be investigated until an official complaint is raised. With no way to prove whether or not such videos are real, one thing is for certain, there sure are some next-level war propaganda. It only takes one look at Funky Town to understand how this works. With the video not being linked to any drug cartel, it is near impossible to track down the torturers. Although it does not work much as propaganda for a specific cartel, it still works as an influence for the entire network of gory videos and tortures that, unfortunately, keep going strong. We can only hope for a day when all of this unprecedented violence and degradation will come to an end. And that's it for some of the most brutal crimes caught on tape. If you like this content, make sure to click on one of the cards on the screen to see similar videos, and I'll see you there.